about what a tariff is. I'm sure you've all seen tariffs in the headlines this year, and it's been a main driver for financial market volatility, but what is a tariff? So a tariff is essentially a tax on goods and services for imported items into a country. When a country imports something, governments have the ability to add a tax to it. This helps shield domestic production and lower demand for international goods. And so essentially, it helps local producers while hurting foreign producers. Who pays for that tariff, and what are some of the implications? First, let's focus on the country that's imposing the tariff. In general, the importer is the first person that pays the tariff. However, they then end up spreading the tariff up and down the supply chain, and ultimately the consumer sees higher prices. The consumer can see higher prices for a couple of reasons. A consumer can continue to buy that imported item at that new higher price through the tariff, or you can start to see domestic producers produce those items. But it's likely that those items are going to be produced at a higher cost. Before the tariff was in place, consumers are likely consuming the product that is the best for them. Either it's the best quality or it's the best price. And so they were generally importing that international product because it offered some sort of competitive advantage to them. So a domestic producer can start producing that, but likely at a higher price. And so ultimately the consumer, whether they're still purchasing the item that is now at a higher tariff or purchasing the domestic item, they're paying a higher price. This in general then lowers demand across the economy. As you're not seeing wages necessarily increase at the same amount as the tariff, and you just now have the same amount of money to buy less goods because items cost more, and so you'll likely see lower demand within that country. The other thing that you can see is potentially supply chain headaches. It takes domestic producers time to start producing these things. Factories don't get built overnight. And so there can be a mismatch in timing between when that tariff goes into place and when companies in the domestic economy are able to match those new demands. Also, these companies that are domestic producers tend to see less specialization. Normally they're focusing on items that they're really good at producing, but now they have the opportunity to produce multiple items and maybe they're not as good at producing those things. As a consumer in that country, you're probably seeing less options available to you. Maybe there's not an exact company in the domestic economy that can produce an item you are seeing outside of the country, and so there's less options available to you. There are some positives to tariffs. First is that the government does collect revenue on the imported items where you're getting a tariff. The second is that domestic producers are likely to see an increased demand. For the country that is facing the tariff, in general, they tend to see less demand or lower exports, or sometimes they have to lower their prices in order to remain competitive. So in general, they are net losers during the tariff situation. The other thing that can happen between these two countries that are facing tariffs is that you can see generally the country that's imposing the tariff sees a stronger currency and the country that's facing the tariff sees a weaker currency. We haven't seen that play out this year. The US dollar has been weaker, which is fairly unusual. So on a net, it's hard to say if it's a net negative or a net positive, but generally it tends to be a net negative, especially if the country that is facing a tariff then imposes a retaliatory tariff.